Hello. Hey, Gojko.
Hello.
Ciao. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Gojko, for joining us. So, welcome everyone. I'm Enrico from Avance Coperta, and today I'm really happy to be here again with Gojko Adzic. Excellent. Thanks for being here again. So, we are here with Gojko for another episode of our series, Small Talk. So, in this series, if you've watched the previous episodes, we talk with our trainers in an informal way, asking some questions about the workshop, but of course, we want to know more about the person as well. So in the case of Gojko, we know he's a very prolific book author, so we're gonna understand a bit more how does that work and the variety of topics he's been covering in the last 10, 15 years, something like that, or more.
Well, I don't know, first book came out in 2007, I think, something like that.
So about 15 years, yeah. So lots of stuff to talk about. Please write your questions to Gojko in the YouTube chat. We're gonna read them as we go along with the chat. So it can be also an interactive live streaming together with all of you from home. Thank you for following us so far. It's been great. And so without any further introduction, I'll ask Gojko to introduce us his workshop on impact mapping, which is not only a workshop that we are doing next month for the second time in remote, I think, but we also met in Milan when it was possible to do the workshops in person. So what is impact mapping? Who is it for? Why is it useful? Lots of questions.
Yeah. Lots of questions. So yeah, I said, this is we've been doing this workshop for a while now, and I think all in all, we have about maybe 15,000 people going through this workshop in one way or another through in different countries. Impact mapping is a wonderfully quick and visual way to align stakeholders, developers, and anybody who's really involved in product development or project delivery on what is it exactly that we want to achieve with a product or a particular milestone of a product, and really focus delivery on business value rather than just pumping out software. Impact mapping helps us really solve a problem instead of ship a solution that might or might not achieve what it needs to do. And it's in academia, they call these things goal-driven requirements engineering, and it's like a mouthful. And if you look at currently popular academic practices, they're all really complicated and all very focused on different types of boxes and arrows and syntax. Impact mapping is an informal, very quick, very visual way. And I found that stakeholders that I used to work with as a consultant can kind of really quickly get into that without a lot of explanation. So it's a good and easy way to get people to really kind of cross different role boundaries and get to an agreement what they want to achieve with the product and how they want to do it.
Excellent. Resonates a lot with, of course, I have to mention that Event Storming by Alberto Brandolini, which is also very visual. And one of the key points you mentioned, indeed, is creating alignment, cross-team, cross-companies, cross everything, really. So the power of impact mapping is in its visual, I would say, easiness to understand and, to get started and do things. So indeed helpful, not all. We stress this with every small talk meetups. It's not only for developers. Indeed, it's for the whole team, to get a common shared.
I think it's even more important to get stakeholders involved there, because those people are the ones that are effectively controlling the delivery and at the end judging if the thing was successful or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and in my experience, kind of stakeholders really benefit a lot from this. One of my consulting clients was a large investment bank, and usually for the next milestone of their product, or kind of internally, product, they were doing 6 months milestones, but it would usually take about 1 month of politics to get all the stakeholders aligned what's into this 6 months, because They are, negotiating budgets internally, figuring out and comparing that to other things they have going on. And after they started doing impact mapping, they reduced the elapsed time to about between 2 weeks and 2 days in a week, which is, if you look at their time and their involvement, incredible as a result, and being able to then provide direction for all the teams that are involved there is amazing, because effectively, you buy a month out of a 6-month cycle, where you can deliver more.
And it's money at the end of the day. It's not days, it's not, it's time to, put everyone together and days of talking rather than delivering. So
time to market is always, critical there. If you can deliver value sooner, it's a lot more valuable than even, saving stuff on just reducing rework.
Indeed. So I'll jump straight to the first question, if you agree. So we have one from Ricardo. Thanks, Ricardo. I'll show it here as well. So what was the most complex scenario that you had to handle during an impact mapping? And how were you able to solve it without creating a mess on the board? Wow. Straight to the point.
Most complex scenario. It depends complex in which case. I mean, we've done impact maps with a group that was going to do the next 2 years of work with, I think, about 100 people or something like that. And they've already gone through whatever user story meant in that situation. So they had, a few thousand user stories that were already estimated and grouped and things like that. And what we did there is they wanted to figure out how to do it in an agile way and do iterative releasing and deliver value every time. So we kind of got them to split into multiple groups, work back from the scope they did to figure out what are the impacts they want to achieve. And they came up with something like maybe 20, 30 impacts, and then work back from the impacts to figure out what are the potential business goals that these milestones could help them achieve. I think they came up with 5 or 6 goals. And then effectively that went to be 5 or 6 maps that were evolved up to the level of impacts and some high-level deliverables. Then the business stakeholders prioritized the maps. They chose one that had the most important business goal. And then when that thing was actually delivered, they decided that that's enough and they stopped the project, because the other goals were not as important and the other impacts were not as important as this thing. They achieved what they wanted to achieve with the first thing. And it turns out that the project started with somebody having a real business problem. It was I think, head of credit risk that had a problem they wanted to solve that was caused by lots of different systems handling their mortgages in a different way. So what they wanted to do is approve or reject mortgages more consistently. But when that thing propagated through the organization, everybody started bolting their own ideas into it because they decided they're going to rewrite the system. And when they're rewriting the system, they might as well do this and do this and do this. So it became this much, much bigger thing than it was supposed to be. And doing impact mapping helped really, again, put the focus on what the original problem was and what they wanted to achieve with it, and really figure out the scope for solving that problem first. And once that was done, again, there were some other higher business priorities. So we were able to solve it without creating a mess on the board by first really focusing on finding what are the impacts. And I think that's kind of, the hint is in the name, it's impact mapping. The impacts are the most important element there. And when we figured out what the impacts are, then we created multiple maps and we kept high-level deliverables on those maps only. That's how we avoided creating a mess on the board.
Excellent. So you already mentioned one of the key points of impact mapping that focuses on the impact rather than what I want to, deliver for the sake of it. And this implies a big change in mentality, of course. And we're going to talk about this later on. I have a question about, if companies or individuals do resist to such change. Because of course,
so I think one of the things really that's interesting to mention when looking at focusing on impacts is a book called 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's a lovely book. I'm really sorry I have not discovered that book earlier in my career. and it's by Stephen Covey and colleagues, and I really strongly recommend everybody read that book. It's an amazing book, not because you will read anything revolutionary in it. There's lots of good ideas, but what's amazing about the book is how clear they are with the language and with the terminology. So it's a survey of, I don't know how many organizations where they've tried to compare what do people who are incredibly good at executing their plans do differently from people that are not really that good at executing plans. And lots of ideas from the Agile community and from the lean product development and things like that, you will see in the book. So people who read these things, they'll recognize lots of ideas, but explain slightly differently. And it gives us a really nice vocabulary to talk about. So there's kind of 4 disciplines. Of course, that's what the book is called, 4 big differences between people who are good and not good at executing their plans. And discipline number 2 is to focus on leading indicators. And they talk in the book how everybody can judge at the end of a project if it succeeded or failed. Like if you want to do something to increase your market share or increase profit, 6 months later or a year later, you will know that's not a problem at all. But that's not good enough to tell you while you're working if you're going the right direction or not. And while you still have a chance to focus on something else, to refocus, to kind of think about maybe improving some areas that you've misjudged earlier, measuring profit, measuring market share is really not good enough for that. And in the book, they talk about how there's a couple of types of leading indicators that are usually good for really driving delivery, and they are unblocking a critical blocker or changing somebody's behavior. And both of these things really show you that you're solving a problem rather than just delivering a solution. And impact mapping fits into that wonderfully because it gives us this middle layer of impact that's all about this kind of behavior change and unblocking critical blockers. And then it allows us to use these things to measure, are we going the right direction? And that's why I think, the magic is in the middle. We kind of have, everybody can think of lots of things they want to do. It's easy to understand what kind of, goals we want to do on a big level, money, market share, risk, and things like that. But measuring just those things is not really good enough to help us while we're working. And that's why defining these impacts very clearly, figuring what they are, becomes absolutely critical. And this is kind of what 4 disciplines of execution tell us. And impact mapping really, really helps with that. So yes, the magic is in discovering the right impacts and using them to focus delivery.
Excellent, Gojko. So as you see, I've written the title of the book, and I'll also share all the links to all the books and videos Gojko is mentioning. Talking about books, I guess one question we always ask is, so how did it all start? And I mean, it's not like one day one wakes up and comes up with impact mapping. We know it's also a book that you published in
2011. So a very important note on this. I did not come up with impact mapping. It's not my baby. It's the baby of Ingrid Dominguez from the INU's interaction design agency in Sweden. The only thing I did is write a accessible book about it, and somehow people loved the book and related to the book, and it got kind of more popular than it was before as a result of a book. I stumbled upon impact mapping at a conference in Sweden where I was talking about some research I was doing in how to focus delivery on outcomes, and there was a person in the audience that said, the thing you're talking about relates very nicely to this practice that we're using in our company, check it out. So I kind of checked it out, and I realized this really solves a bunch of problems I was trying to solve in a much better way than I was trying to solve it. And that's a result of, I guess, that work being done by an interaction design agency because they really know how to focus on usability. That's why impact mapping is more usable than all these kind of big academic techniques. So that's not, I do not want to take any credit for it because that's not fair. The only thing I did is write a book about it. And people should really look into kind of in-use and their work if they want to learn more about impact mapping. Of course, we do workshops and stuff like that. And it's a nice, approachable way to learn more about it. And I think if there is anything I've done to it, that is to make it more applicable to like iterative software delivery projects where we're really looking at quick delivery and things like not just big picture planning, but all of the credit really goes to people from in-use. And for me, my journey started by basically making all the stupid mistakes I can make. And I was the CTO of a company where we were incredibly good at delivering software. We were horribly bad at solving people's problems. And we ran out of money because we were delivering a solution that just, wasn't solving any problems. And we were obsessed with the technical quality and with the delivery pipelines and with automated testing and with all these things that technical people can lovely get obsessed about. But kind of we were really missing a way to look at the big picture. And then when the company failed, I was personally affected by that. I wanted never to go into that same problem again. And I started researching what other people are doing to prevent problems like that. And that was a emerging practice of software product management that kind of started emerging back then. I kind of had some early conclusions from the research. I was doing talks about that because lots of other people had the same problem and still have the same problem. If you look at, that's a continuous problem. Fred Brooks in the Mythical Man Month wrote that the biggest problem in software is deciding exactly what to build. So, that's continuously going to be a big problem. And I think impact mapping is a wonderfully nice solution to that. And more people should know about that. And I really became passionate about impact mapping when I learned about it and I applied it a few times. I realized the power and I thought more people should know about it and I wrote a book. And then, conference talks led to workshops. So, there's a workshop now that we're doing together and we've been doing for a long time.
So, I'm really happy that we have kind of a scoop, I would say, because I've heard about this for years and I didn't know, in all honesty, it wasn't yours. So, did I get it right? It's from the company in-use?
Yes, exactly.
And Ingrid Dominguez.
Yes. She
okay, so full credit, absolutely.
Full credit,
So we have
yes.
this scoop, and I'll share the resources, as I said, in the comments below. So that's really excellent. But of course, your book is probably the reason why most people know about it. So thanks for that, of course. But good to know also the background. Happy, we have this information because, of course, credit is due where it's due. I still have my questions, but I'll carry on reading also some by the public. So we have Eduardo who says, hi, Eduardo, thanks. Do you have strategies to update the map with learnings, things from iterations or on the deliverables, like you change input elements with those learnings?
Mm-hmm. So again, going back to the 4 disciplines of execution, they talk about, I mentioned the second discipline is focus on leading indicators. And the third one is to kind of create a compelling scoreboard. And the fourth one is to create a cadence of accountability. And just for full reference, the first one is just to focus on the wildly important, focus on the really important stuff. And that's what I said, it's not rocket science. But one of the things they talk about when they say create a compelling scoreboard is that if you're not keeping score, you're not playing, you're just practicing. And I love that metaphor. We're not really playing for real if we're not keeping score. So once you have these impacts defined, it's important to define your expectations around impacts. How, not just that this behavior would change, but how much, in what direction? And one example that's really good is from Mark Schwartz, who wrote the book, The Art of Business Value, where he was involved in a large government project where they've identified that the key behavior change they wanted to do is for human caseworkers to be able to process more cases per day. So that now begs the question, how many cases per day are they processing now? And how much more is more? And then monitoring that and publishing it so people can make their own decisions based on that is a great way to delegate decision making to the edge where people are really working. Collecting that information, making sure that it's available, and then using that to drive prioritization is really, really important. That's kind of the last practice they talk about in 4 disciplines of execution, which is create a cadence of accountability. So with the organizations I used to work with as a consultant, mostly the cadence would be every 2 weeks or every month. But if you're doing something that has longer market cycles, like a hardware product that can only get released once every year or something like that, then it's going to be a slower cadence, of course. So the strategy, to kind of answer Eduardo's question directly, the strategy is to really have some numbers assigned to the impacts, like how much is it now, how much does it need to be over what period of time, and then to monitor that as you're delivering, to explicitly go and collect that information and publish it so people can make their own decisions based on it. And what you will find is, okay, maybe for this specific impact, you have 20 user stories. And it needs to go from, 1 to 10. And by magic, the first user story gets you 10. Okay, the other stories have just become deprioritized. They're out of scope. Or alternative, you have 10 stories. The impact needs to go from 1 to 10. The first 3 stories don't make it go to 2. It stays at 1, or even worse, it drops to half. That says, we have wrong assumptions about this. Our ideas are not really good. We need to do more customer research. We need to, or maybe we need to give up on this impact and do something else. And those are kind of really the strategies. Focus again on the impacts. The trick is in the name. Put some numbers about that, and really try to commit to working on impacts instead of committing on working on delivering stories or tasks. And move the prioritization to impacts and reporting to the level of impacts.
So again, you're mentioning the change in perspective that we were talking about before. So focus on the impact rather than basically anything else you were doing before. We were talking about, so thanks Eduardo for that. We hope that answered the question. We touched on books and producing knowledge in this way. So we know you've produced a lot of books, and are you probably doing something now as well? You'll tell us.
I'm writing 2 books at the moment.
Well, there you go.
So I'm writing a book on impact mapping case studies with my colleague Christian Hassa from Tech Talk in Vienna. We've interviewed a bunch of organizations on how they use impact mapping, and we've collected feedback from kind of a much wider group online. And what we're trying to do now is extract patterns from that. So we can say, look, if you want to do impact mapping and you're in this situation, then these people need to be involved in an impact mapping session. It should take this long, and you need to prepare these things before that. If you are in this situation, then it's going to be different. Don't try to organize a big session, organize several smaller sessions. So kind of that book is, I'm hoping, going to be out in about a year or 2. We're still kind of formulating these ideas and testing them. The other book I'm writing now is with my friends Slobodan and Alexander. We are doing a book on serverless development and AppSync and real-time serverless applications. That's another area that I'm really interested in at the moment, and it's a lot of fun because it's a technical emerging architectural thing, and there's a lot of change there. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I really don't have a set writing routine. I just kind of try to sit down and write books.
That's a start.
I consider, I heard Henrik Nieberg talk about this at the conference a while ago, and I really think it resonates with me. He was talking about how writing books for him is a way to do a brain dump from short-term storage into long-term storage. So his short-term memory is kind of clear for more new things because he's hyperactive and kind of interested in lots of things. I'm also interested in lots of different topics. And for me, dumping my current thinking and my current knowledge into a text file is a way of freeing up short-term memory for other things. And then it's also a good way to consolidate the knowledge. Writing a book about something forces you to really make sure it's consistent and that you explore the dark areas that are not really that clear. And every time I've written a book, I've learned a ton about any topic I've written about, because I had to do some additional research, or people pointed me to kind of additional stuff, like technical reviewers would say, this is wrong. It was already done 20 years ago by somebody else. You should read this book. And then I get a ton of pointers for books to read.
That's amazing. So it's still a learning process for you as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Everything and it's set in stone. Well, absolutely. It is set in stone in a way, but the process to get there, it's kind of a whole learning thing. A bit like teaching, probably, by saying things allow you learning.
Exactly. And the impact mapping book, for example, I when I started writing the impact mapping book, I was doing a lot of research to find potential influences about that and potential kind of parallel ideas. And because the visualization is so wonderfully simple, but it's kind of amazingly powerful as well. And I found some almost kind of the same visualization, but not done as a hierarchical map, done as a sequence of steps, but kind of the same 4 questions done by some psychologists in the 60s that were not doing it for anything product related. They were doing it to support learning processes in organizations and kind of a psychological model of learning and things like that. So there's lots of really interesting stuff that happens once you start researching a topic. And doing a book forces you to seriously do the research.
Amazing. It's really interesting. So the whole relearning thing, and then put it into, a nice and understandable form for everyone. You might have jumped, some logical steps, but doing that really helps. So let's go to another question from Marcel. Thanks, Marcel. So how to introduce impact mapping with the 4 disciplines of execution within the team when I'm constrained within the role of the developer, a waterfall delivery model.
So first of all, I can't answer the question for a specific organization without knowing the details of a specific organization. That's, just based on this, it's easy to make generalizations that might or might not apply to what Marcel needs to do. But one of the things I suggest people investigate is introducing this idea of behavior changes delivering value. Because you can do that without introducing impact mapping, really. And you can do that with any kind of development model. It's just a question of what behavior changes are supposed to happen as a result of you doing this task or you doing this story or you doing this piece of the waterfall. And then trying to measure that and using that to guide delivery. Even within the waterfall delivery model, people come back and reevaluate what they've done. And they often test what they are doing and things like that. And of course, if you are constrained with releasing only once every few years, it's not easy to test whether your assumptions are true or not. But you could potentially say, well, this piece here is quite risky. Let's test that this is actually solving a problem, so that once the waterfall does, finally fall and we drop the release and people start using it, we know that we solved it in the right way. And then you could do, you could bring some test users in, or you could offer it to an experimental population. You could find maybe a beta client who's willing to sit with you and prove that the behavior change is even possible or not possible. Or if there's a possibility to dog food, and use this product within your own organization, you can try measuring impacts that way. You don't have to prove that an impact works for everybody all the time. All you need to prove is that you're going in the right direction, that this impact is working for 2 people or 5 people if you put them down. I know this is not a waterfall delivery model, and it's not something that is doable for people all the time. But for example, when we were building Mind Map early on, I used to go to lots of conferences, and I had a laptop with me, and we wanted to find people who are completely new to our product to prove that they can do something better, faster, easier. And I just kind of find random people, ask them to, give me 5 minutes of their time, explain what we need to do, and then they would try to use it, and I would measure the time it takes to do, because we really were trying to do something, faster. And we would do small changes that we're not really certain about and test it on unsuspecting users like that. And this got us an incredible amount of feedback, where things that we were thinking about as developers that were good ideas actually turned out to be bad ideas. One example was for people that wanted to access their maps, we had a button on a screen called My Maps. And I thought, well, you want to see your maps, you will click on the My Maps button. And as we were testing this, people were continuously confused, and they were asking for a file menu. And after explaining about 5 times, like, you don't need the file menu if you want to see where your maps are, here's a button, My Maps, but people were not seeing that. So we introduced the file open menu, and people were clicking on that. And there's kind of lots of interesting stuff you can discover like that if you put your software in front of users. So my suggestion would be, figure out what are the behavior changes you want to introduce. If you're constrained to the role of a developer, you might need to talk to product people, business analysts, or customers, or you might need to come up with your own ideas about it and offer it to your clients and say, I think we're doing this because we need to get human caseworkers to process more cases per day. The best thing that can happen is they can tell you, yes, that's correct. The worst thing that can happen is they can tell you, no, that's wrong, and then they tell you what they think it is. And then you can kind of try to measure that and try to guide that. And then if you are constrained within a role of a developer, your job is probably not to act on this information, because priority is probably not under your control, but you can provide this information. You can create this compelling scoreboard and provide ammunition to people who need to make decisions to actually make decisions.
Excellent. Hopefully that answers Marcel's question. Thanks, Gojko. And this leads me to the final one. I had others, but they were already answered by Gojko. So thanks, Gojko, for all the excellent insight. And this kind of links back to Marcel's question. So I already anticipated this. So is there any resistance when impact mapping gets mentioned? Is it a thing with the name? Does it happen, first of all? And considering this implies a change in mentality, what's some stories you can share?
I've never really had resistance in terms of naming there. And, again, if you find the resistance towards a name, just don't give it a name. Just draw a picture and start talking about this. The resistance I've found towards impact mapping mostly comes from people who are measured on delivering tasks. So in a large organization, again, I'm overly generalizing, and I know there are exceptions, but in a large organization, people who have a project management role are usually tasked with delivering a specific scope. Impact mapping is not consistent with that, because impact mapping is talking about delivering outcomes, not delivering scope. And those people typically, or those people can feel resistance towards impact mapping because it's in conflict with their incentives, and it's in conflict with what they're tasked to do. They're tasked to kind of deliver these 500 stories or 500 features, and they want to optimize the process for that. I've also had reasonable resistance from impact mapping from people who do external delivery to customers where they've signed a fixed scope contract, again, fixed scope, fixed amount of money. We had this really one weird case with a large ERP software company where they wanted to do impact mapping for an internal product they were building. And as a result of impact mapping, they realized that about 5% of the scope they had in the plan is holding 95% of the value. And there was a big question whether the remaining, scope even has any value or not. And after the impact mapping session, all the stakeholders agreed it was really useful, it was wonderful. They all went back to their teams and continued on the old plan, rather than prioritizing that 5%. And the people that brought me in were really surprised. They were from a kind of lean change management part. And we did another workshop and got all the stakeholders back and said, didn't we all agree that this other plan was much, much better than our current plan? And they said, yeah. So, and then one of the stakeholders said, it's excellent for next time, but, not good for this one. So next time we'll absolutely do that first. I said, well, why not? Why not? And everybody was like, well, we've already committed to our customers. And said, well, your customers are going to love getting value sooner. And, and then after a bit of time, kind of, we really were not getting anywhere. And we stopped for lunch. And then one of the people talked to me in kind of, separate. Said, look, we've already told our customers it's going to be these many millions of euros. And we have 200 developers working on it. We can't come back to the customers and say, look, here's like 95% of your money back. And it's not as big as you kind of expected. Because first of all, then we have to find work for, 200 people for all this time. And the second thing is, like, the sales organization is not going to let us do this. We've already committed to take this amount of money from the customers, and that's what we're going to do. So I think kind of on both sides of this equation, if you have like a fixed set of money and a fixed scope you've promised, and you've already done your kind of paperwork and it's already been approved, it's very difficult to then, do this. But for people that are doing internal software delivery, where you really want to focus on value, for people that are building consumer products, where it's your product, you want to focus on value, or even kind of when you're working with a customer, you want to make sure that they get value out of it, but you're doing it before they promise to give you a lot of money and a lot of time, and you don't want to come back to them and say, look, my bad. So I think that's kind of mostly resistance to kind of this, where really, people don't want to focus on outcomes, they want to commit on scope. But then that's a totally different problem they're solving. They're not really delivering outcomes, they're providing an employment opportunity for a few hundred people. And this is not solving.
It's probably a type of change that needs to happen before, not halfway through something.
I remember we did one workshop actually with Avanscoperta a while ago, and every time we paused for questions, there was a question from one person. Unfortunately, I forgot what the name is, and they were asking, how do I do this without anybody from the business wanting to talk to me? Like no customer's representative talking to me. It was like, well, how on earth are you building a software product where nobody from the customer wants to talk to you? And, it's a politically complicated situation. And then next time we stop for questions like, how do I do this without anybody from the customer wanting to talk to me? And I said, look, every time we stop, it's the same question. So let's talk about your situation a bit. It seems to be that you have some particular problem. Let's solve that. And then, we can move on with the workshop. And it turns out that this person was working for some software company that's delivering software to some municipal government there. And from the way they were explaining it, it looks like the whole project succeeded at the point where the contract was signed. Everybody who's important finished everything they have to do when the contract was signed. I assume there was kind of some brown envelope changing hands a bit later with, a commission for the project. Nobody from the municipal government wants the new software. They don't care. The best thing that could have happened is just, money exchanging hands, and like we don't do the software. And these people are basically delivering software that nobody wants. And so impact mapping doesn't solve that problem. That's a political corruption problem. That's a, it's not something that really needs an outcome because the outcome is already done.
Yeah. With another scale of situation where you want.
So, in situations like that, you will get resistance to impact mapping because it shows you that what you're doing is pointless. And people don't like being told that what they're doing is pointless.
Yeah. Well, those situations get resistant from a lot of things, I guess, as well as impact mapping. Okay, Gojko, so that was brilliant. I think we are just about on time. So we had a lot of questions. Thanks all for being here. Is there anything you want to add as we close?
So if people want to learn more about impact mapping, check out impactmapping.org. There's lots of really good resources there. And there's resources for beginners. There's resources for kind of advanced practitioners. There's even resources for people that want to go around and teach impact mapping. We have an open source version of an older workshop that is published there. And of course, we do have a workshop coming up with Avanskoperta very soon. So if you want to kind of practice it, it's a very practical thing. We're going to be doing Zoom and Miro and lots of practical work. Send an email to Enrico, I guess, so you will have some details about that later.
Absolutely. So thanks, Gojko. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.